First, I just want to say thank you for having me come and talk today. This is my first Creative Mornings. I'm not much of a morning person, but free coffee is always a good incentive to get out the door. So the first thing I want to do is kind of just introduce myself. My name is Tylan Davis. I'm 25 years old. I graduated from Kendall College of Art and Design with a major in graphic design and a minor in art history. I currently work as a designer slash software engineer doing product design for a company called Payload CMS. We basically build a content management system that's completely headless. You can use it for building apps, websites, e-commerce, video games, whatever you need. It's a place to store your content, and you can do whatever you need to do with it without any restrictions. So here's my little company plug. A little bit more about me personally. I love to learn. One of the things I pride myself on is always trying to figure out as much as I can about anything that I'm interested in, no matter what it is. There's a lot of overlap between creative things that I do and non-creative things I do, and I feel like no matter what it is, there's always an opportunity to dig a little bit deeper and understand something as fully as I possibly can. I prefer to learn the hard way, meaning I don't like to take shortcuts if I'm learning about something. People who know me well know that if there's any question I have, I'm instantly going to Google it and I'm going to find the answer, because simply not knowing something is not an excuse, and I just love to always push myself to know all that information and know all those things that are out there, because I like to solve problems, and the best way to solve problems is to know things and to have experience with those. And that brings me to my next point. Is recently I've been learning a lot about myself. And everything in this presentation, I either came up with it while in therapy or just sitting alone by myself. So if you're looking for any sort of magical takeaway from this, maybe go to therapy or spend some time thinking by yourself. And as I've started to kind of dig into, who am I as a person, who am I as an employee, who am I as a creative person, I find it's very hard to kind of find what those things are, who I am, from a completely internal perspective, rather than things outside of me. And so in January, when I was told about this talk and heard that the topic was going to be treasure, the first thing that I kind of thought about was, what do I treasure and why? And initially, I start to think about all the things most people might commonly think about. What are the trends that I'm up to date with? I'm a young creative person working for an agency or for a software company. That's very cool. I must be trendy. I must be on the pulse with things. 8 design trends that will dominate 2023. I probably know them already. The other thing is skills. I went to school. I have a degree in this. There's a lot of people who are self-taught. I probably know more than them. The 12 most essential skills every fine artist must have. I probably could, name 11 of those if I tried. Other things might be, networking opportunities. I like to think I'm a sociable person. I can go to a networking opportunity and talk to anybody. That's a good skill to have. And then I might be a good employee. I think so. I like to think that I'm somebody that a company can depend on. I might be able to generate value for whoever I'm working with. And so, despite all those being good, positive things that people might want to, associate with themselves or value about themselves, I noticed that none of those things have anything to do with me outside of other people. And so with so many different sources competing for our attention nowadays, I find that it's even more important to let yourself speak for yourself rather than relying on those sort of outside influences to kind of guide who you are as a person and who you are and what you value. And not only that, but all industries, including creative ones, demand that we think, act, and work a certain way in the name of productivity and efficiency. And being a human is about so much more than being somebody who's productive, somebody who can generate value, somebody who, is simply just an end to a means. And so as I start to look inward to say, what is it about me that's different, I kind of started thinking about this idea of unburying my treasure. What is that stuff that's inside of me that when nobody else is in the room, when the internet doesn't exist, when I'm unemployed, when I don't have any friends, what do I value about myself? What can I take from that and put towards, you know, who I am, what I call myself, how I talk about the things that I do. And I came up with this. Unburying your treasure is about connecting who you are to what you do. So there are things about me that I know, that I believe in, and there's things that I do. And if I constantly compare the things I do with outside influences, I start to lose myself in those things. And so with that, I want to kind of present a few areas of encouragement today. I have 5 of them, and those are environment, healing, beliefs, the past, and the future. So the first one is environment, and the encouragement for this one is to observe your surroundings. Being intentional about your spaces can make thinking, working, and creating more fulfilling and productive. And so oftentimes when we think of a work environment, we might think of, what does our office look like? Do we work at a cool office that's got a ping pong table and free coffee, or it's downtown, or it's got cool music playing? But it doesn't always need to be just the place that you work where you generate ideas. And if the only place where you're generating ideas is a space built by somebody else, then there's obviously other influences being enacted upon you. Where we work can really influence the way we think, and I think it's so easy to kind of get caught up in making a space that looks cool, that might feel functional, that has good technology or, you know, cool decorations, and they might feel good, but at the end of the day, we need to step away from those sort of personas as creative people and think first, what are the human things about me that need to be considered when I design my space? And so a couple prompts, to think about this is, one, does a human work here? When I say that, I mean, if you weren't somebody who worked on a computer, what are your hands doing? You know, if you have a design project, do you immediately start on the computer? Do you write your notes in a digital platform? Do you sketch on an iPad, or do you sketch on paper? There's a lot of things that humans do nowadays that we would have never been able to do even 100 years ago, including designing on a computer, making digital art, and there's nothing wrong with that, but there's a certain psychological connection that our brains have to our appendages. If you spend 5 minutes on paper, you're going to save an hour of time on the computer. And that's not because our hands are better than computers, it's because that process of idea generation starts with our bodies and being able to make a space that answers to that sort of idea of, oh, my ideas don't start on a computer, they start with me. So making a place for your body to be able to do those. Maybe you have a desk that has nothing else on it, but a stack of paper and some pencils, you know, something, a place that's dedicated to that very human connection to what we do. The next one is, does a comfortable human work here? And that kind of goes back to, you know, the idea of like, there's a lot of decorations and technology and all these things, but it's like, sometimes that can be a little overwhelming. And sometimes you might need to take a look at your space and say, did I prioritize productivity without thinking about comfort first? I think we all can agree that it's so hard to be productive, to be efficient, to be creative when we're not comfortable. And so taking a second to think, how can I make myself feel a little better? Like, don't even think about the work yet. Let me think about, where am I going to sit? Is my chair good? Do I need to get a new chair? Is this desk a good height? Is the window like too bright right now? Do I need to close the blinds? Like, thinking about those things before you start to paint, before you start to draw, before you start to design. All of those things are important. and kind of setting yourself up to feel comfortable to be a productive person. The next one is there enough room for me to grow? Do I feel like I have room to spread out and kind of feel like there's potential to make new things? And that kind of goes with the first one of like, we need space for things other than just the computer, just the, the technology, just the canvas. There needs to be room to walk around and let those ideas actually take up some real space, not just in one particular area. That also means getting outside of that workspace and finding new places to visit, new places to kind of think about new things and experience new things. If you only spend so much time in a room and you never leave, or if you work from the same place every day, there's ideas all over the world, down the block, anywhere you might go. And if you're not letting those places also be, a good environment to think about creative ideas, you might be missing out. And then the last one is, do I make time to adjust the space to my liking? Am I making a point to say, all right, once a month I need to just make sure everything looks the way it's supposed to. I need to spend some time cleaning my office. That's one that I personally struggle with a lot. I just got a little cat, so my office is a completely different space nowadays. But if you set up your office once, you might get promoted. You might land a big gallery show. You might go through so many life changes, and your space needs to change too. You need to always be thinking about how can I ask those other questions, does my space make sense? Does it still feel human? And sometimes we get it wrong. Sometimes we make changes to our space that we thought were going to be cool, and then it's like, oh, I actually really kind of hate this setup. There's nothing wrong with just every once in a while checking in on yourself and saying, do I still feel right in this space? Just really kind of prioritizing, making your environment conducive to yourself as a human, and not for the trendy office with cool LEDs behind your monitor and all that fun stuff. The next area is beliefs, and the encouragement for this one is to affirm your beliefs. Everyone has beliefs, and it's important to stand by them. Make a point to let your beliefs guide your creativity. And so by beliefs, I don't necessarily mean religion. I don't necessarily mean politics. It could be anything that you believe in. These are the sort of things where when we're in school, there might be 10 people at your table and 9 of them all think one thing looks really cool and you just absolutely hate it. We're led to believe that that's wrong, that we all need to form a consensus, but there might be a very good reason why you don't agree with everybody else, and it's important to stand by that. If we only ever work on agreeing with each other, we're going to miss out on a lot of different perspectives in the world. And obviously, some perspectives are, way more out there than others. But in general, good conversations can come from people standing by their beliefs and being able to, feel that what they believe influences something else in the world. And as creatives, being people who constantly make new things, if we let the things we stand for guide our thinking, guide our ideation, there's a lot of new ideas that can come out of that, a lot of cool perspectives that we can share with the world. So some of these prompts that I came up with is, 1, do I believe in the work I do? This one I feel is very common, especially if you work for somebody else, because oftentimes the work we do, it was not our idea. We didn't want to do it, actually. And it's very easy to kind of just let your boss make you believe in the work you do, or try to convince you to believe in the work you do. And while that makes sense from a business perspective, as employees, we're humans first. And if we don't believe in the work we do, it's not going to be its best. Sometimes that means standing up and saying, I think this is wrong, I don't think this is worth doing. I think we need to think of a better way of doing this, because right now I don't believe in this, and if I continue to do this work, it's not going to be as great as it can be. And that kind of leads me to the second one, which is, what about this makes me proud? And oftentimes we don't really have that seat at the table to say, hey, let's stop this project that's already like thousands of dollars spent on it, you know. But there's always the opportunity to say, okay, even though this isn't ideal, what can I do to make myself proud about this? Sometimes it's important to have a challenge where you're able to say, although it wasn't my idea, I do have a little bit to contribute to this. I do have something about this that I believe in. And being able to tap into those things that you stand by can make that project something to be proud of. Something that, you know, wasn't ideal, but because I let myself believe in it, it made it much better. The next one is, am I trying to impress myself or somebody else? And I know that it goes without saying that we've all kind of felt like this. I'm standing up in front of a room full of creative people who are probably older than me and probably more experienced, and I'm trying to convince you all to think about yourselves more. Am I impressing you? You know, maybe, but I'm here to kind of, you know, do this for myself. These are all things that I'm trying to work on for myself, because at the end of the day, whether or not other people believe me or believe in my work, I've got to believe in it first. And that goes without saying that, you know, if you're working to impress other people, sometimes, you know, that's impressing yourself too. If you're very aligned with somebody else's thoughts and goals, then yeah, you might be impressing both people at the same time, but it's very easy to forget that, like, we need to make work for ourselves first. We need to stand up for what we want. We need to create for ourselves. You know, that's why we go into the industries that we're in. That's why we make work to begin with, is because we get something out of it. And if we stop making work for ourselves and start making it for other people, it can really burn you out on creating in general, and you might not feel any connection to it anymore. And there's nothing worse than having, you know, something that we all consider part of us be lost in the effort to impress somebody else. And the next thing kind of goes with the first two is, can I make a negative thing positive? When there's challenges at work or challenges with something we're creating, something we're doing, whatever it may be, not letting ourselves feel like the challenges are a bad thing. Challenges are a good thing, because if we believe in our ability to overcome challenges, that's where that pride comes in. That's where that positivity comes in. Challenges are not about defeating something that's bad. It's about succeeding in situations that aren't ideal. And so kind of flipping things from, this was bad and I just made it through it, to, this could have gone bad, but I actually made it good. You know, sometimes neutral is great. Sometimes surviving is the strongest thing we can do, and we don't need to think about that as something that's like, okay, I did good enough. I made it through this. That's something to be proud of. That's something to believe in. And so that leads me into the next one, which is healing. The encouragement for this is, prioritize your needs. By acknowledging your needs, you create space for personal growth and the discovery of new creative depths for yourself. So when we think of healing, we often think of, like, I was hurt and I needed to spend some time getting better. Well, we're all humans and we're all made out of meat and bones, and all parts of us can get hurt and need time and rest to kind of feel better. The big one being the brain. And not enough people spend time letting their brain rest and letting our brain kind of like take time to work out. You know, if you think about athletes, they work their muscles all the time. They can't work their muscles every day because that would hinder their ability to perform. The brain is just like a muscle. If you're constantly trying to make it do something, it's going to get overworked. And if you can think about trying to, you know, run a mile further than however far you could have gone, it's going to hurt. And you're going to need to rest the next day. The brain works the same way. You can't push your brain so far. It will burn out, it will hurt, and you will not perform the way you want to. And so these prompts, I think, are some of the most important in this slideshow because this is something I personally struggled with a lot. The first one is, can creativity be a healthy substitute for procrastination? By this, I mean, well, first of all, I'm a procrastinator. I put things that I don't like off to the very last minute. And some might say that's a very common thing for creative people, and I would agree. But one of the things that I think makes it easier is using creativity to solve those problems. One of the ways that I do this is if I've got a bunch of chores around the house that I need to do, I like to think of a creative schedule that can squeeze in all of those random things into like a game almost. So if I've got to do dishes, you know, I've got 30 minutes to do the dishes, and then I'm going to feed the cats. And while the cat is eating, I'm going to play some video games. And once that's done, I'm going to do this. You know, there's creative ways that we can do anything. And thinking about chores as like, oh, let's gamify this. Let's turn this into something stimulating. You know, that can be really rewarding and really help you get past that whole thing of procrastination. Finding creative ways to kind of squeeze in those hard to do things around the things that we actually love to do. The next one's the biggest one. Am I using fun work to imitate rest? This, I think, is where burnout comes from. Because as creative people, yeah, everything we do is fun. Like, people who don't work in creative industries look at creatives and think, oh my gosh, that's so cool. I can't draw, I can only do stick figures. Well, me too, I'm a graphic designer, I can't draw either. I draw stick figures. Not everything we do, just because it's interesting, just because it's creative, just because we make something out of nothing, doesn't mean that it's not work, doesn't mean that it's not effort. And I find it's so easy to think about, you know, maybe we just got done working a job that's not creative, and I'm going to go home and work on that painting I've been trying to do for weeks. Okay, so when do you rest? When do you turn off? Do you have time where you're literally doing nothing? Is your time when you're doing nothing looking at other creative stuff like social media or blogs or whatever it may be? You know, obviously those things are relaxing, but I do think there's a difference between relaxing and rest, and I think rest needs to be something intentional. Rest needs to be boredom. It needs to be that time where you have nothing else going on besides intentional rest. And not just, or the fact that work can be fun doesn't make it not work. Just because we have, you know, fun things to do doesn't mean we don't need to turn our brain off and let it relax. The next one is, how do I prepare my mind and body to be creative? So like I said, athletes have to, you know, they work out their muscles and then they need rest. Well, the other thing athletes do is they stretch and they warm up. Our bodies are just like an athlete's, and our minds are just like a muscle. We need to warm them up. And especially if you do something like painting or drawing or something where you're actually using your body, yeah, maybe you should stretch before you paint, or, you know, whatever it may be. There's something cool that happens when you kind of take a moment to center in on your body, whether it's stretching, whether it, you know, I play bass guitar, and one of the things I do is I massage my hands and wrists all the way from my wrist to my fingertips, because it helps me not only like warm up my fingers so they don't get strained, but also like kind of makes me feel like very in tune with my hands. I'm still working on transferring that warm up to a keyboard for work, but being able to kind of make that connection between your body, your mind, and then turning that into, okay, now I'm ready to be productive. I've warmed up my creative muscles, which sometimes is your hands, but oftentimes is your brain. What do you do to kind of turn your brain on before you actually get started? And the last one for healing is, am I letting myself learn and make mistakes? And this one I think is important because it's so easy to kind of compare ourselves to others, and if there's nobody else in the room to compare yourself to, you have the option of one, shutting down when you make a mistake, or letting it be an opportunity to get better, or an opportunity to say, yeah, that's something I could work on. We don't take enough time to appreciate the things that we do well, because we spend a lot of time criticizing the things we don't do well. And I think that's a mistake. I think it's important to look at failure, look at mistakes as something that's an opportunity to make better, an opportunity to heal those things. You know, whether a mistake is you messed up, you know, in your painting and it doesn't look the way you want to, well, guess what? You get to paint some more. You love painting, don't you? You know, you messed up at work and the project didn't make the client happy. Well, guess what? You get to do another draft. You get another opportunity to make something better. And if we start by thinking about it as failure, it's instantly put into a negative connotation. But if we think about it as, okay, I now have the opportunity to think about this in a new way. I have a responsibility to myself to make this better than I did the last time. This is a good thing. I have an opportunity here. This is not a mistake. This is an opportunity. The next area is the past. And the encouragement for this is to revisit yourself. Allow yourself to reconnect with a time that was full of curiosity and try to find the joys you may have forgotten along the way. This one is really important to me because this is one thing that I really leaned into recently, and it kind of led me to the job I have now. I went to school for graphic design, and I'm a self-taught developer, but that actually started when I was 8 years old. Because my dad was a football coach who taught random classes at the high school that he was a coach at, and one of those was web design. And in second grade, he gave me a textbook about web development, and it taught me HTML and CSS. And I can remember flipping, I've tried to find the specific textbook because I want to buy it again and read it again, because it's hilarious to think about how much things have changed since I was 8 years old. But since second grade, I've had this knowledge in my mind, whether or not I was using it or not. It's always been there. And in my senior year of college, as I started, you know, thinking about what's my thesis going to be, I started to remember, oh, that's right. I actually know HTML and CSS. And as you start to think about, like, what kind of fields can a graphic designer go into, obviously, web and UI, UX is very prevalent, and having those skills is really good to have. And I was able to kind of like jump into that thing that I always knew about that some people might not have any knowledge of, and kind of let myself lean back into that, because it was something that was super important to my childhood. And it kind of took me from being, you know, just a general graphic designer to the designer who's working on all the websites, to the interactive strategist, and just recently I started a job as designer/software engineer. And if you would have told me in college that, oh, you're going to be a software engineer when you're 25, I wouldn't believe you. But because I was able to kind of tap into that part of my childhood that meant so much to me and connect it to who I am and the skills I learned in a more formal setting, it really opened doors for me. And so the prompts for this are, what were my favorite things to do when I was younger? For me, that was learning code and writing code on the family computer and making really weird websites that didn't really do anything. We had to remember this was 2006, and you know, before Facebook was popular, there wasn't much you could really do on the internet, for an 8-year-old at least. You know, but other things, you know, music, you know, is something that I've, you know, dabbled in as a child and kind of make it part of myself now. You know, I like to listen to music, I play a little bit, and you know, having those little things that I did when I was younger, how can I kind of like bring those back? And something that's really cool when you bring those things back is you get that childlike joy again. It's not always just like, it's so easy to take the things we do as adults and kind of like make them so boring by making them about money or careers or success, but like those childlike things, yeah, some people do those for money, but if your connection to that was, yeah, that was like one of my favorite things to do as a child, well, you can do that as an adult and it's still going to have that spark to it. The other thing is, what was hard then that might be easier now? if there was things that, you know, you struggled with as a child, adults are much better at solving problems, and it might be good to kind of look back and say, you know, what did I want to do that I couldn't? What was holding me back? Was it, you know, my family didn't have the money for this, or I just wasn't good at it, you know, or the stakes at that age were too high for me. Maybe I wanted to play a sport when I was younger, but I just wasn't very good at it. Well, guess what? You can go play it now and not be competitive and just enjoy it. What's something I know already that most people don't? I think this is a really important one, and I think creative people should really tap into this more. What's something I know already that most people don't? What do I know that's like really niche, and how can I turn that into like something cool about me that most people, you know, might not have any knowledge of, that, you know, it can make a difference. I think this is like really important when you work in an industry that deals with like clients and stuff, because if you're the one person in the room who has knowledge about that client's needs, you know, you've got a benefit now. You can really like, you know, make a difference because you're coming in with a lot of context that, you know, your peers might not be able to have. And it's not always a competitive thing. Sometimes it's just an opportunity to say, hey, have you ever heard of this? Like, maybe we could try doing something from this approach, or, you know, maybe let's get together and think about these sort of things. You know, it could be a really good way to kind of step out of like your role as the creative person who does the same thing as all the people sitting next to you, and say, here's something we can do that's not about design or not about art or whatever it may be. It's important to kind of like not only do those very like industry specific creative things. And the last one is, what can I teach my past self? And I think this one kind of goes with healing a little bit, in that there are things that we know now that we would feel really good telling our past self, like, look at all these cool things. You know, if I could tell 8-year-old me all the cool things you can do with a website nowadays, like it would be such an incredibly eye-opening feeling. And, you know, maybe take some time to kind of, you know, act that out. Pretend you're talking to your younger self and tell them what you do now. Tell them all the amazing things that, one, are possible, and two, you know how to do those. It's a really freeing thing to not think about, you know, where am I right now, but where did I start and how did I get here? And being able to make that connection with your younger self is a really freeing thing. And then the last one is the future. Open the box. This is something that I worked through in therapy. My therapist would ask me to kind of talk about, you know, what are my goals? What are the things I want? How do I see myself? Where do I see myself going? And as I would talk about it, she would say, you know, every time you talk about the things you want, you get so excited, and then right before you're done talking about it, you come up with a limit to put on yourself. She said, you go up and you close that box immediately. So for example, oh, I really wish I could do this, but whatever. That limit that I kept putting on myself was not needed. It was simply anxiety. It was simply, you know, insecurity. And once I was able to picture that box, I was like, oh, I can just keep going up. I don't have to put a cap on anything. I can let my dreams and aspirations go as high as they want. There's no reason to put a limit on the future. So, pave a path for your future self that embraces challenge and seeks solutions. You don't have to put limits on the future. I'm a big believer in the future. As scary as the world seems sometimes, I do think the only way out of, you know, dark times is through, you know, hard work and working together and believing in the things we do. And if we look at the future as something scary, it's very easy to put a limit on ourselves. And it's very easy to come up with reasons why we can't do something or don't want to do something. But as creative people, we are kind of the ones who have the, you know, the way of thinking that lets us see things that other people can't see, that lets us come up with ideas that are necessary to make the world a better place. And if we put limits on that, you know, we will be stuck exactly where we are. And so the first question is, am I putting myself in a box? When you talk about the things you like to do you end those on, you know, a feeling of, yeah, this is impossible, that's why I love it? Or is it, yeah, here's why I can't do that? You know, when we talk about the future, quite literally anything is possible. And so by putting a limit on that, you kind of like take what's impossible, what could be, and you make it possible with today's constraints. And that's no way to get to a better place if you have to always put things back into reality. You know, the future isn't real yet. It has to be made. You have to find it. What do I want to be different in the future? Do I see the future, like if we constantly think about the future as a bad thing, like is that what I want the future to be different? Do I want the city to be filled with smoke? Like, or do, you know, we need to think about new ways and like what we want to see in the future? If there's things that need to change, obviously none of us were in charge of the smoke all over the city. But there are much smaller things that we're able to kind of think about and be different in the future. Problems at work. Am I going to come up with reasons why a problem at work can't be solved? Or am I going to, you know, try to encourage new ways of thinking, new ways of working together that might solve those problems, that might make things better, not only for myself, but for everyone else as well? How can I embrace change in a way that feels genuine? This, I think, was the reason for my hesitancy and why I put myself in a box, in that I like to be very practical. I don't like to give, you know, I don't like to sell people something that I don't think is true. And part of that was, you know, I like people to trust me, and if I promise something that doesn't come true, I will feel bad. But the thing about the future is, you can promise anything because there's always time to make it happen. And if you need to limit, you know, what change is possible, you're just limiting the ability for change to even happen. And so once I kind of stopped thinking about the future as like something that needs to exist today, it made me feel like, okay, I can think about things and let that be genuine. These are things that I want. We should put desire into the future. That way we have something to actually pursue. That's what feels genuine. There's nothing genuine about, you know, a future that looks exactly like today. That just doesn't exist. Change is always going to happen. We might as well put some positivity and some desire into it. And then this next one is for everybody in here. What do I want to be when I grow up? You know, we'll all be alive in 5 minutes. You know, let's think about what we could do next. There's no reason to feel like what we've done is it. You know, there's so many stories about people who, you know, go through, you know, life-changing moments, and maybe they started a business at 60 years old, or maybe they went back to school when they were 50. And I went to Kendall. I had people in my classes who were 55 and decided to get a degree in interior design. That's the coolest thing I can ever think of. And, you know, there's something really interesting about being somebody who feels like they've learned as much as is appropriate for themselves and stops there. Because that person who was 55 and she went back to get her interior design degree, she was the smartest person in the room. Of course, you know, she's twice the age of everybody else in there, and that was awesome. Not only was she able to really push herself even further, but she pushed the entire rest of the room further, because everybody in there was able to gain experience from those people. And so growing up is not just like, okay, where's that limit that I want to reach, and once I get there I stop reaching further. It's, okay, now that I'm here, what's next? And when you think about what's next, you know, what does that mean for yourself, but what does that mean for, you know, your ability to affect change in the world? That change never stops, and so allowing yourself to reach further will continue to make change in the world. And so, to sum it all up, being a creative person is about embracing wonder. Don't be afraid to embrace wonder from within. Despite that we're all in a room to hear somebody else tell you what to think, I hope that this was, a good way, a good set of prompts for you to really think for yourself. And I would encourage you to take time to really kind of ponder, what is it that I value? What treasure might I have inside that I can tap into, that I can bring towards everybody? Because it's not just about making yourself feel better, but it's about being able to lift yourself up in order to show up for those around you and be able to share that treasure with everyone else. Thank you.